Hello, everyone, and welcome once again to the Temple Institute Parsha class. My name is Gedalia Meyer, and I'm podcasting from Ma'ale Adumim in Israel. Privacy is one of those rights that we all take for granted. It is so assumed that we all have this God-given privilege that it is almost impossible to question it. Who would ever dream that we don't have such a right? It is as integral to our sense of self as our beliefs or our emotions. It is really a type of entitlement that we acquire very early on in life, with the first glimmerings of it appearing during the toddler years. It grows and grows as we grow, until we reach an age when we can't imagine ever having been without it. But it is quite interesting that it is a right that is probably unique to human beings. There is no indication that it exists in the animal world. We don't know when in human history it first arrived and staked its claim on our minds. Back when we were in the caves, there probably was little to no room for such a luxury. Perhaps it goes back to Neolithic times when humans first began settling in homes with walls and doors. Somehow it emerged from the forgotten eons of our distant ancestors and gradually became one of the most universal birthrights of our species. Privacy has many applications and many arenas. The most basic is the need to be alone, away from the observation of others. Everything else is related to privacy stems from this basic need. Why do we have this need? We are, after all, known as social animals. Hardly a day goes by in anybody's life in which they do not interact with others in some way. But even with all that interaction, we all have this need. We require our space, whether it be physical or emotional. We need to believe that we and we alone have access to certain thoughts and feelings. Anything else would be a betrayal of our innermost sense of self. Privacy, of course, includes some control of our own bodies. We don't want others prying in where they don't belong. This is why sex can frequently be so intimate and so threatening. We are exposing parts of ourselves that are normally kept concealed. To a greater degree, this sense of propriety is even greater when it comes to attending to our private physical needs. We don't want anybody looking when we are doing our thing in the bathroom. This is so fundamental that it's deemed unnatural if anybody doesn't demand it. When it comes to thoughts, things become a bit more blurred. Thoughts are naturally private, so there is no great debate about the right to privacy there. We tend to derive a reassuring sense of safety from the knowledge that nobody else can tell what we are thinking. Our thoughts and feelings are frequently like roller coasters, and we really don't want them exposed to the world. But on the other hand, we do reveal those thoughts and feelings all the time. We may be selective or even deceptive about this, but it is certainly one of the primary activities of human interaction. We want our privacy, but we also want others to know who we are. This is one of the most interesting aspects of the sudden change in human interactions initiated through the phenomenon of social media. It gave almost unlimited and universal access to reveal our thoughts to just about anyone. While we all have our boundaries in this arena, there is no question that some walls have come down for what is probably the first time in recorded human history. What was once deemed private and respected as such is now part of the public domain. We don't know where this is going and how much technology will creep further into the private recesses of the mind, but we do know that we haven't reached the end of the process. We may wake up one day and find that our cherished sense of privacy is ancient history. We can find hints of this tension over privacy in one of the most famous verses of the Bible. Quote, "It is not good for man to be alone. I shall make for him a helpmate." However one understands this phrase helpmate, this verse speaks of the fundamental sense of aloneness and the need to rectify it. This verse leaves us with the impression that being alone, which is a manifestation of privacy, is not good. We should not want to always be alone. We should want someone else there who shares our secrets. Obviously, not everyone agrees to what degree we should allow this invasion of our private space, but there is no question that some walls should be breached. This week's Parsha is called Kedoshim. That word means holy, but it is written in a plural form that doesn't really exist in English. It is the key word in an opening verse of the Parsha that sets the tone for the entire Parsha. This parsha, perhaps more than any other, is about being holy. It is not simply the fact that the parsha's name contains the word holy. This word, or one of its close variants, comes up again and again throughout the parsha. It is the common theme that joins what is otherwise an apparently random list of commandments. There doesn't seem to be any cohesive sense of flow to these commandments. They do sometimes come in large or small groups, such as the list of incestuous relations and sexual prohibitions of all sorts that appears towards the end of the parsha, or the short series of general moral rules that appears somewhere in the middle. This short list includes the famous love your neighbor as yourself as a kind of ultimate goal for where all morality should lead. There is also an even briefer list of warnings against employing any means of divination or soothsaying in deciding the affairs of our lives. But in between all of that is just a smattering of different injunctions and recommendations that don't seem to have anything to do with each other. There is an occasional warning against idolatrous practices or something about the proper way to bring an animal offering. There are agricultural laws and laws concerning how the justice system should work. Then there are the truly strange commandments, such as a prohibition against wearing garments made of mixtures of fabrics. This is followed by some vague rule about a man having relations with a half-slave woman and what the consequences of such a union are. There is a commandment to not consume the fruit from a tree within 3 years of its planting. This is followed by a repeat of the commandment to not consume blood. We then see something about not shaving off the edges of the beard or the sides of the head. There is even a prohibition against making tattoo marks on the skin. There is a warning to respect the elderly and to treat strangers living within Israelite society with respect, plus something about having accurate weights and measures for honest business dealings. Throughout it all, there is a constant reminder that appears again and again, seemingly for no particular reason. This reminder is that, quote, I am HaShem, your God. Why this reminder is stated so many times is one of the mysteries of this parsha, but it comes up with tenacious regularity, as if to always bring back to the forefront of our minds that this is what it's really all about. It all boils down to realizing that God is there. Somewhat early on in the parsha, there are two commandments that fit right into the random list, but also stand out as their own short list. They read as follows: do not curse the deaf, and do not place a stumbling block before the blind. They are both contained in one verse, which ends with the classic refrain, you shall fear God, I am HaShem. That's basically all the Torah has to say about these two somewhat intuitive warnings. Right after this verse, the list goes on to something about perverting justice and gossiping. Those two warnings are quite interesting, as is the follow-up statement of, you shall fear your God. What are these warnings really all about? Why should there be a prohibition about cursing specifically the deaf? If anything, we might expect a more general warning against cursing anybody. The same question could be applied to the warning about placing a stumbling block in front of the blind. It would seem that a stumbling block in front of anybody should be prohibited. Granted, the blind are particularly susceptible to stumbling blocks, but it does seem that the Torah should be against them in all cases. It happens that the classic rabbinic interpretation of these warnings does make them more general. They interpret blind as someone who doesn't know what's coming. Any sort of deception comes under this very general prohibition. This is really a commandment against cheating or taking advantage of others. The warning against cursing the deaf is also generalized to include basically everybody. The word deaf simply means that the one to whom the curse is directed doesn't know about it. It's a curse in which the recipient is unaware of any invective from the curser. But this interpretation just brings up the question of why this should be prohibited at all. What is so terrible about cursing somebody if they don't know about it? It's not as if the person really feels it in some way, like they might sense that stumbling block in the parallel warning. It's just a curse, a voice of anger or frustration or hatred that will never be known to the one to whom it is intended. As long as things are kept private, why should this be a problem at all? Perhaps the one doing the cursing is letting things get out of hand, but maybe they have a perfectly good reason for wanting to curse that other person, and an equally good reason for not wanting to reveal what they are up to. As long as nobody knows what happened, nobody is really harmed by any of this. Perhaps the answer to this question lies in the reminder at the end of the verse. You shall fear your God. I am HaShem. Granted, this curse might not become known, but as soon as it is thought in the privacy of the mind, it is revealed to God. This is a fundamental belief of the Bible and monotheism in general, that God knows what we are up to. We might prefer to believe that what was done in the privacy of our thoughts can stay there and nobody will be any the wiser. But the belief in an omniscient God challenges that belief to its very core. The concept of fearing God is this fundamental belief. Whether we like it or not, the sacred privacy of our thoughts is revealed to God. Somebody else might not know what is going on in the darker recesses of our mind, but God does. This belief is disturbing to many people. Consequently, they reject it. But it is the common theme of everything in this parsha, and to some degree, the basic belief of Judaism. The way to become holy is by recognizing this and managing to accommodate it. One of its applications is not cursing somebody behind their back, but it really means realizing that God knows what's going on. Shabbat Shalom.